Hey, welcome. So this video is part 2 of the Spring Inversion of Control and Dependency Injection series. So let's check what will be covered in this video. In our previous video, part 1 in this series, we discussed the basic project structure of a Spring Boot project, and we also ran the skeletal application that we downloaded from Spring Initializer. In this video, I'll add few classes, few lines of code to our first project application.java, thereby implementing a simple Spring Boot application that will demonstrate inversion of control or IOC and dependency injection or DI. I explain the code and as well as show how inversion of control and dependency injection works. In the next video, part 3 in this series, we'll cover some common types of dependency injection along with examples. Also, we'll go through few API documents in the process, that is the Spring API documents, in order to explain the annotations that will be used in the code. Also, definitely we'll be looking at definitions, I would rather say formal definitions of Spring Dependency Injection, Inversion of Control, and Spring Bean. Now let's head over to our IDE Spring Tool Suite. So we are back in our IDE. Let me expand this node, the import node, and you can see what are the things have been imported. So one is the Spring Boot application and the other is Spring application. Okay, let's explain in short what these annotations and class mean. So let's have a look at a Spring Boot application first. I'm hovering over the annotation Spring Boot application. Now, as you can see, this annotation is basically a composite annotation and it is comprised of 3 annotations, which are Spring Boot configuration, enable auto configuration, and component scan. So I'll be briefly going through few of them and we'll be having a more detailed look in our next video regarding these annotations. So briefly speaking, Spring Boot application makes the developer's life easier by allowing configuration for any application that will run in the environment of Spring Framework and Spring Boot. And component scan, basically what it does is that it scans for the Spring Beans that are present in the class path and loads them while starting the application. So don't worry if you don't get it fully. We'll be going through the application, run it, and explain the annotation, especially component scan in the process. Okay, let's start adding code to our basic application that we downloaded from Spring Initializer. So you can see we have the code, a single line of code, Spring application.run, and then our first project application.class and args as the parameters. Okay, now we need to really bring in application context or the Spring container. So if I just hover over this run method, you can see it returns an instance of configurable application context. And run method, as you can see, is a static helper that can be used to run a Spring application from the specified source using default settings. Now, as you can see, the primary source to load here, in our case, it's our first project application.class. Args are the application arguments. Now, we are not using any arguments in this particular application, but you know that we can pass arguments to the Spring Boot application. So let's start coding and we'll bring application context into picture. So application, then context, right? I'll press Control space or Command space for Mac. So here it is bringing the application context, and here you can see application context org.springframework.application context. Now I'll add a variable. Let's name it context and put the equal sign. So here we are receiving the return value of the run method. And if we hover over the application context, you can see it is a central interface to provide configuration for an application. And this is read-only while the application is running, but may be reloaded if the application supports this. Now, application context actually represents the IOC container or the inversion of control container. We'll shortly explain what IOC is, but let me tell you that application context is used for registering beans and managing the life cycle of Spring Beans. So we'll also have a look at the definition of Spring Bean. Now, briefly speaking, Spring Beans are just simple Java beans. Now, there are various types of application context such as class path, XML application context, annotation, config application context. We'll discuss them in future videos. Now, if you hover over the Spring application class, you can see that it is a class that can be used to bootstrap and launch a Spring application from a Java main method. Now, let me tell you one thing is that Spring application is a part of Spring Boot and not Spring Core. Now, if you hover over the application, Spring application, you can see it says the package to it belongs is org.springframework.boot, then Spring application. Okay, so Spring is modular and Spring Core is just one of the most important modules of Spring. We'll be having a look at the various modules of Spring in subsequent videos. So what happens here is that the run method of Spring application class returns an instance of application context, which is our Spring container. And when the application is run, basically what happens is that application context identifies all the available Spring Beans in the class path and loads them into memory. Now, in order to speed up the video, I'll copy paste some few simple class and interfaces that will be used in this Spring Boot application. And definitely I'll explain what these classes are for and how they will function. So here at the left pane in the package explorer, you can see I have copy pasted 3 code artifacts. The first one is hello service, which is a simple interface with a method hello that returns a string. And then you have a hello service IMPL or implementation of the interface, which simply returns the string hello world. And if you have a look at welcome service, it has a property which is hello service, and then it uses that to construct a string in the welcome method, as you can see over here. So it will return, say, welcome to GoKoders, and whatever the hello method returns from the hello service instance. And finally, we'll invoke this welcome method of welcome service class within our first project application. Now, this is a very simple application, and you might be wondering where the dependency injection and inversion of control comes. You'll shortly realize as I go through the application and I explain how the magic of Spring dependency injection and inversion of control happens. Now let's get back to our first project application, and I'll just hit enter, and we'll try to retrieve an instance of the welcome service. So let's type welcome and then service, hit control space, and in that imports the welcome service class, and I'll add a variable which is a welcome service itself. And finally, we'll invoke the getBean method. And for that, you'll be using the context instance. So context dot getBean, right? And here you can see there are several versions of getBean. One is a getBean that takes a class instance. One is a string instance, getBean. And these are the two things we'll be having a look in the videos to come. And in this current video, we'll be not using the other instances in the third row, fourth row, and other, such as class T, object args, string name. So let's use this method getBean that takes an instance of class. So let's hit getBean, and here we'll try to retrieve an instance of the welcome service. So we'll type here welcome service, hit control space dot class, and we'll be adding the semicolon at the end. So that completes this line of code. Here you can see we have invoked the getBean method. Now this getBean method is responsible for retrieving a bean instance from the Spring container. Now there are several implementations of the getBean method, as you saw. We'll code and discuss two of them, which is retrieving bean by type and retrieving bean by name. Now here we are retrieving bean by type since we have used a class instance of welcome service. Now you might be wondering how the context is getting this instance of welcome service.class. As I mentioned earlier, that when the application starts, the application context or the Spring IOC container scans the class path and registers all the Spring beans available in the class path. And for us here, welcome service is one of them. Now welcome service is in the same package as our first project application class is. So we don't need any special configuration in this case, but in subsequent video I'll show you what happens if this welcome service class resides in a package other than this default package. Now listen to this one. This is mentioned in the Spring documentation. It says that the application context interface has a few other methods for retrieving beans, but ideally your application code should never use them. Indeed, your application code should have no calls to the getBean method at all, and thus no dependency on Spring APIs. So basically we are using getBean here just for demonstrating dependency injection and inversion of control. But ideally, Spring documentation recommends not using this getBean method explicitly in your application. Now I'll invoke the welcome method of the welcome service now that you have got an instance of the welcome service from the Spring container. So let's get an instance of Spring type and let's name it greeting. And then we have the welcome service and I'll invoke the welcome method. So remember that welcome service has a welcome method, and if we go into the welcome service, you can see it constructs a string welcome to GoKoders and concatenates with the string returned by the hello method of the hello service IMPL class. So let's now print it in the console, the greeting that you're retrieving from the welcome method. So I'll hit enter and I'll do a sysout, hit control space, and we'll display the greeting instance. Now we are done coding our application, the main application, which is our first project application. I'll save all the artifacts and simply run the application. Now remember, in our previous video we added the Spring Boot properties, spring.main.web application type equal to none, and this helps us to prevent loading of Tomcat since we don't really need it. This is a plain Java application and doesn't have a web context. So let's run the application now. I'll use the taskbar icon, and here you can see I have our first project application, and let's run it and let's see what happens. So Spring Boot is loading. I'll expand the console and bingo, we have got the output which says welcome to GoKoders hello world. Now let's have a closer look at the application and its various interfaces and classes. So I'll minimize the console and first I'll go to hello service IMPL. So here in the hello service IMPL you can see that we have used an annotation which is a component. Now here if I hover over it, it says that it indicates an annotated class is a component. Such classes are considered as a candidate for auto detection when using annotation based configuration and class path scanning. Now let me tell you one thing, that in Spring Framework application we can use three styles. One is annotation based configuration and the other two are XML based configuration and Java configuration. So we will be using annotation configuration largely throughout most of the videos, but in the next video we'll be discussing what XML based configuration and Java based configuration means. So now you mark a class as a component it is behaving like a Spring Bean, and it makes easy for the application context to identify the hello service IMPL in the class. Application context, whenever it will see a class is marked with the component annotation, it will simply register the bean and load the class in the memory. And now let's get inside the welcome service. So here in the welcome service, you can see we have used annotation called auto-wired, and this annotation has been used over the property hello service. So here, this is where the dependency injection magic happens. You can see that we have not created an instance of the hello service IMPL using the new keyword, the Java new keyword. Rather, we are simply auto-wiring the hello service property, and Spring Framework returns us an instance, or rather injects an instance of hello service in the welcome service class. So this is what dependency injection is in simple terms. Now, what is inversion of control? Basically, you'll see in the next video when you see at a quote from Martin Fowler that inversion of control and dependency injection are basically two sides of the same coin. It is basically called inversion of control because of the fact that we really don't need to create an instance of this hello service in this class, thereby meaning that we are not taking control of creating an instance of the hello service. Instead, the control is transferred to the inversion of control container, or the IOC container, which provides us an instance of the hello service. Now you might have several questions in mind, is that what is the utility of IOC and dependency injection? In our subsequent videos, we'll have a look at the advantages of using inversion of control and dependency injection in Spring Framework. Now let's play around with our application by simply removing all the annotations that we have added and see what happens. So we'll first remove this annotation, or rather comment out this annotation component, and then we'll go over to hello service IMPL, and we'll also comment out this component annotation, and of course we'll comment out this auto-wired annotation. So here we have commented out all the annotation, we have commented out this annotation, and now we'll save the classes and simply run our application. So let's go over here and run the application, our first project application, and let's see what happens. So I'll maximize the console and let's see what Spring comes up with. So here you can see it says exception in thread main or Spring Framework.beans blah blah, and then you can see the exception is no such bean definition exception. So it says no qualifying bean of type com.GoKoders or first project.welcome service is available. Now this happens because of the fact that we have removed the annotation component. As a result, the application context is unable to find the welcome service bean in the class path and hence unable to register it and load it into the memory. So let's restore our annotation component in the welcome service, but we'll keep this auto-wired commented as well as the component annotation within hello service commented. Let's save and run the application once again, and let's see what happens. We'll maximize the console once again, and here you can see we again face an exception. So it says null pointer exception, cannot invoke hello service.hello because this .hello service is null. Now let me explain why this is happening. Now the reason is in the hello service IMPL class, you can see we have commented out the component annotation. Now for the same reason that Spring container was unable to find the welcome service bean in our earlier running of the application, the same happens over here, that hello service IMPL is not being able to be scanned by the Spring IOC container. As a result, when you go to the welcome service, you can see this variable hello service is not instantiated. And not only that, we have commented out the auto word annotation. As a result, no dependency injection is happening, and hence this instance hello service is null. Now we'll restore the annotation component in the hello service impl.class and run the application again, but with the auto word annotation still commented out. Let's save and run it once again. And let me maximize the console and let's see what happens. So here you can see still we are getting null pointer application, and it says hello service is null. Now the reason is that now hello service is now being scanned by the IOC container and is being loaded into the memory, but since no dependency injection happened, Spring Framework or the IOC container doesn't create any instance of the hello service, and hence this .hello service is still null, as you can see over here. So now we'll restore the auto word annotation and let's see what happens. So let's get to the class welcome service and we'll uncomment this auto word annotation, save it and run it. Spring Boot loads, and here you can see we are good to go. It says welcome to GoKoders hello world. So now we'll comment out the component annotation in hello service IMPL, but keep the other annotations intact, which is the component annotation in the welcome service and the auto add annotation over the property hello service. Let's save and run the application once again. So I need to maximize this console since we'll have a bigger error stack. So here you can see it says the description field hello service in the welcome service class required a bin of type hello service, and that could not be found. The injection point has the following annotations auto word. Now it says consider defining a bin of type hello service in your configuration, and the application failed to start, of course. And if you scroll upwards and scroll right, here you can see exception encountered during context initialization. Now here it says that there is an unsatisfied dependency injection, error creating bin with name welcome service. Unsatisfied dependency expressed through the field hello service, and the nested exception is no such bin definition exception. And then it says no qualifying bin of type hello service available, expected at least one bin which qualifies as auto word candidate. Now let's minimize the console and restore the component annotation in hello service IMPL, save it and run it, and we should be good to go. So here our Spring Boot is again loading, and here you can see we should be getting, yes it is, you can see it says welcome to GoKoders hello world, the output that we are looking for. So that's it in this video. If you enjoyed the video, please like this video and share this one too. And if you're enjoying all the videos from the GoKoders channel, don't forget to subscribe and turn the bell notification on so that you get notified whenever I publish a new video.